So yesterday we read part of chapter 8 in Stuart Little. So we only have a few pages left. So today's chapter read aloud might be a little shorter than usual. So yesterday when we left off, the bird Margalo was being taken care of by the Little family. And Stuart was growing pretty fond of her, I think. Here, and he tossed her the thermometer. Margalo put it under her tongue, and she and Stuart sat very still for 3 minutes. Then she took it out and looked at it, turning it slowly and carefully. Normal, she announced. Stuart felt his heart leap for gladness. It seemed to him that he had never seen any creature so beautiful as this tiny bird, and he already loved her. I hope, he remarked, that my parents have fixed you up with a decent place to sleep. Oh, yes, Margalo replied. I'm going to sleep in the Boston Fern on the bookshelf in the living room. It's a nice place for a city location. And now, if you'll excuse me, I think I shall go to bed. I see it's getting dark outside. I always go to bed at sundown. Good night, sir. Please don't call me sir, cried Stuart. Call me Stuart. Very well, said the bird. Good night, Stuart. And she hopped off with light bouncing steps. Good night, Margalo, called Stuart. See you in the morning. Stuart settled back under the bedclothes again. There's a mighty fine bird, he whispered, and sighed a tender sigh. When Mrs. Little came in later to tuck Stuart in for the night and hear his prayers, Stuart asked her if she thought the bird would be quite safe sleeping down in the living room. Quite safe, my dear, replied Mrs. Little. What about that cat Snowbell? Asked Stuart sternly. Snowbell won't touch the bird, his mother said. You go to sleep and forget about it. Mrs. Little opened the window and turned out the light. Stuart closed his eyes and laid there in the dark, but he couldn't seem to go to sleep. He tossed and turned, and the bedclothes got all rumpled up. He kept thinking about the bird downstairs asleep in the fern. He kept thinking about Snowbell and about the way Snowbell's eyes gleamed. Finally, unable to stand it any longer, he switched on the light. There's just something in me that doesn't trust that cat, he muttered. I can't sleep knowing that Margalo's in danger. Pushing the covers back, Stuart climbed out of bed. He put on his wrapper and slippers. Taking his bow and arrow and his flashlight, he tiptoed out into the hall. Everybody had gone to bed and the house was dark. Stuart found his way to the stairs and descended slowly and cautiously into the living room, making no noise. His throat hurt him and he felt a little bit dizzy. Sick as I am, he said to himself, this has got to be done. Being careful not to make a sound, he stole across to the lamp by the bookshelf, shinnied up the cord, and climbed out onto the shelf. There was a faint ray of light from the street lamp outside, and Stuart could dimly see Margalo asleep in the fern, her head tucked under her wing. Sleep dwell upon thine eyes, peace in thy breast, he whispered, repeating a speech he had heard in the movies. Then he hid behind a candlestick and waited, listening and watching. For half an hour he saw nothing, heard nothing but the faint ruffle of Margalo's wings when she stirred in dream. The clock struck 10 loudly, and before the sound of the last stroke had died away, Stuart saw 2 gleaming yellow eyes peering out from behind the sofa. So, thought Stuart, I guess there's going to be something doing after all. He reached for his bow and arrow. The eyes came nearer. Stuart was frightened, but he was a brave mouse, even when he had a sore throat. He placed the arrow against the cord of the bow and waited. Snowbell crept softly toward the bookshelf and climbed noiselessly up into the chair within easy reach of the Boston Fern, where Margalo was asleep. Then he crouched, ready to spring. His tail waved back and forth. His eyes gleamed bright. Stuart decided the time had come. He stepped out from behind the candlestick, knelt down, bent his bow, and took careful aim at Snowbell's left ear, which was the nearest to him. "This is the finest thing I have ever done," thought Stuart, and he shot the arrow straight into the cat's ear. Snowbell squealed with pain and jumped down and ran off toward the kitchen. "A direct hit," said Stuart. "Thank heaven. Well, there's a good night's work done." And he threw a kiss toward Margalo's sleeping form. It was a tired little mouse that crawled into bed a few minutes later, tired but ready for sleep at last. And in this picture, you can see Margalo right here. Wanted to point her out just in case you couldn't see. And then we have Stuart with his bow and arrow, and Snowbell, sneaky Snowbell. Thanks for listening.